Style, precision, innovation, Sonic Heroes has it all. I can go on an endless retrospective about Sonic Rush Transition to 3D, recounting every single detail about this game. After the story peaked at Adventure 1 and 2 where a change in the gameplay formula was needed, both because game reviewers complained about Sonic's handling and speed and being forced into playing characters that were not Sonic, and the second reason being because Sega foreseeing the dark future had they made another game utilizing Adventure's multi-character adventure formula. This one's for all the rough 3D transitioners, yet it still wasn't enough. A 3D platformer's challenges to the players in its level design and enemy design, and the latter can be ignored in favor of forced platforming, presenting the player with a gauntlet of jump, how well you can jump, can utilize jumping mechanics from wall, run, spin, slide, all sorts of jumps. Sonic is all about speed, and the adventure games fail on that front, misunderstood, due to those games placing a focus on spectacle and presentation over general gameplay while Sega was still finding its footing with incorporating speed into the equation. Give 64's Mario a crack and the gameplay falls apart. Suddenly designing levels becomes harder in order to compensate for faster speed and satisfaction from the player, not to mention glitch. So what's the wider point here? Streamlining gameplay mechanics was in order, and that's where the brilliant team formation comes into play.
Let's blast through with Sonic speed!
Okay!
Alright!
Sonic is an X character. How do you account for Y and Z without completely bloating his moveset and accidentally creating gaps in levels? The ring dash was good, but over-reliance rewards the player very little for repetition. The bounce brace did nothing and the flame somersault took Sonic nowhere. Oh, what's this? I'm having a vision, back to when people liked Sonic games. And being the peak of 2D Sonic that game was, why not reincorporate the arcade design back into Sonic, but in 3D? With Tails acting as the Y-axis and Knuckles doing whatever on the Z-axis, Sonic has safely continued being X. The level design accompanying this new team formation system could suddenly take wider and more ambitious stretches, taller hills and terrains for flying characters, enemies to actually pose a threat for power characters to break through, and the swift green hills and loops for speed characters to blaze. The team formation isn't slow by any means either. Whereas in the adventure games, you have to stop and adjust to a much slower pace for treasure hunting and mech stages. Heroes is constantly pushing the player forward, and in engaging in its mechanics instead of sticking to speed, the player achieves something called flow state combat, a term I just made up on the spot. Going back to my theory of the professional and the noob, you can see a direct difference in how someone who's mastered the game's systems compares to someone who doesn't engage or learn it at all. Did you know when power characters jump, you can press the attack button once and the other two characters will circle him and do damage to surrounding objects and enemies? I sure didn't, until I engaged with the game. It's a difficult trick to get the hang of, but that small detail adds a layer of depth. Combating enemies is no longer homing attack fodder and is actually fun, rewarding the player with continued speed if pulled off correctly. And characters can level up as well. Not every stage will need speed characters at level 3. Sometimes it's better to get flight characters Thundershoot up, or maybe a level has stronger enemies at the start, so it's better to level power characters. Thank goodness Sega didn't make a level progression system, because those don't give a sense of progression at all. The game gives the player all the abilities at the start, and incrementally strengthens those abilities as the player plays well. With a ranking system, scoring, and a story that doesn't waste time with dialogue and cutscenes. This is the freaking DMC3 of the franchise with how much it gets right. With enough gameplay and replayability to go in, do a level and quit while still managing to move forward in terms of story completion and chaotics. With each new game's release and wildly praised fan game, my grip on Heroes tightens harder. Oh, another boost game where nothing matters and everything is automated. Frontiers was the most egregious with this. Adding open world to a formula that only focuses on X is the worst thing you could do with 3D Sonic. All of a sudden, level design doesn't matter. The player is boosting through the air, going from point A to point D, then E. What is the level at that point if you can casually fly over it? Enforced interactions with the level feel even more forced, unable to be integrated with the speed at which Sonic can go. Then speed needs to be capped, circumvented with a button that can do all. This is terrible design. Even Sonic 06 manages to be better feeling and fluidity and control than what's coming out now. And Secret Rings, for how automated it is, manages to have deeper depth in the combat stapled into Frontiers and soon X Shadow Generations. Sonic in this era of games has never controlled poorly or slippery. It's on the player to adjust. I can't imagine what kind of hard turns these players make on the road when they insist Sonic's speed is hard to control. You move forward and press back to stop on a dime. Should he show a sign saying I'm going to turn now whenever the player inputs right or left? What's the mindset that goes through a player's head when he thinks he can stop in the middle of a loop? You fall the same. Worse in 3D because you push back against the game. The boost games function way worse than that. There is no left and right, or even back to move. Unless you're in a 2D section, but at that point it loses half of its 3D game status. You move forward and there is only forward, and there's no reason to move anywhere but forward. Side routes are relegated to being the place to put collectibles rather than shortcuts for skilled players to take. They're so wildly pointless in execution. Instead of going forward, you go left and grind a rail for a bit until you're back moving forward. All freedom and gameplay mechanics have been stripped in favor of convenience, giving the player an illusion that they're playing well. Heroes' tight level design has its shortcuts placed in spots you wouldn't notice on a first playthrough, and it takes some skill to get to. Rewarding the player with shortcuts, item boxes, level ups, or whatever. They have the same functionality as they were in 1 through 3. Because movement is tight and precise, neither favoring nor discouraging one actions over the other, Heroes' formula is able to function as a perfect translation of Sonic's classic era into 3D. Any remake of this game will miss the functionality and fundamental point of the mechanics, probably adding a boost button which will only hurt the level design. In my opinion, rather than stripping the team mechanics, I want to see expanded on. For example, the Tornado's Hurricane can be used to give flight characters a higher boost in height without draining their meter. Power characters can throw their speed counterpart to get back in the fray faster, and speed characters can use guns. I'm kidding, of course, unless you give it the Shadow.